You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hey, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April Budden.
And I'm Virstyne Henry.
Today we don't have any guests scheduled for our show. We're just going to kind of vent some stuff out. We don't have any guests yet. We're going to try and get our friend Liam to join us later. But right now we're just kind of piping in so that we can talk about a few things that are going on right now. So why don't you go ahead and take it over, Virstyne? What's your beef? What you got going, girl?
I'm pissed. Well, this is probably, by the time this airs, this would be our third or fourth show. We've done quite a few on Zionism, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and what's going on over there. And, I'm just really disturbed and livid about, first of all, I made a comment because Obama is standing by Israel, which, for us in this movement and listeners of the show, it's probably no surprise. But I made a comment on my wall, and like all my family has basically jumped on, and not all of them, but, I've had some family members to basically, get mad at me because I said, fuck you, Obama. Basically, this is what I said. I said, fuck you, Obama. You should give back your Nobel Peace Prize because you're not doing shit. Now, I had some people, some friends and family members that jumped on, and they were, like, so upset that I said the F word to Obama, God forbid. And, I really had to call out their bullshit because I know that if this was Bush, they wouldn't have jumped on, And there has been, I know that there are people in my family that have talked about and complained about the fact that, there are a lot of people that don't like Obama because he's black, which is true because there are a lot of racist people in this country, and we do have a race problem that we need to deal with. But on the flip side, there are a lot of people who voted for him because he was black. Mm-hmm. And that's just as racist. And it's really just... I can't think of a word right now to describe it, and I'm sure it'll come to me in a minute or so, but I'm just really, I'll just say, for lack of a better word, disappointed in people who can't see what is going on and what's happening because they are so blind to Obama that they can't even bring themselves to say, I'm standing beside him because he's black. So I've had people to say, he's our president and you shouldn't say that. I'm like, are you standing beside him because he's our president or because he's our first black president?
Right.
And that's why. I know that's why. Because I know that, I remember when Hurricane Katrina happened, and there were a lot of people that were pissed of the way that the blacks were treated in Katrina, and Bush was president, and they were cursing him out left and right, But now I say, Obama can't even hear me. He doesn't even know I exist. He doesn't know that I'm on this radio show saying what a demonic asshole he is. And yet, they're going to take it personally and get so offended. And I also had another family member get upset at me, or not upset, but she was, I was like, are you aware of what's going on in Gaza? And she's like, oh, well, yeah, it's just in the Bible. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? I didn't say that to her because, she's my cousin, and it's really hard not to curse her out. She's older. There's some things I respect about her. I'm not really looking forward to going back to my family reunion. I think I'm going to be pretty unpopular, especially after I voice my views about Obama, because I have a pretty big family, and they know, now they know how I really feel. But anyway, I don't give a fuck, because at the end of the day, I want my soul, and I know that if they weren't so brainwashed, then they would agree to, because I know deep in their heart of hearts they don't believe in killing and justifying, dropping bombs on children and wiping out an entire race. And it's just like this whole divide and conquer, we always bring it up on the show, but it's just, and it's ironic to me too that African Americans are so brainwashed in religion that they've been, are so loyal to religion that they've been brainwashed to believe in. Africans didn't, they had different religions. I mean, there's so many because Africa is a huge continent and there were different tribes and different influences and, so they believe I think, they believed in higher powers, but, some maybe were polytheistic, some are monotheistic. But they didn't believe in Jesus and they didn't believe in the Bible. They couldn't even read English when they got here.
Right.
So, I mean, they had their own culture and their own way of living, before it was, before this European way of life was on them. And they kind of integrated some of their culture with European culture. But I just, and also just the irony, I think, if Jesus, I think he did exist, but it's ironic because, I don't think that he would want people to have religion in his name. I think he'd be pissed.
Right.
Because that's not what he didn't say worship me and go out and murder a bunch of people if they don't believe what I say.
Yeah.
He didn't say that. Nowhere in the Bible. But,
Right.
people get fanatical. And it's funny because we've talked about atheists on this show. And I told him, I think I brought this before, I can understand to a degree how atheists get so fed up with this shit and they're like, fuck it, I'll just be an atheist. But you don't
Right.
really extremists. And every religion uses, hides behind evil stuff that they're doing or they see other people do. And they don't want to take responsibility for it. And they'll say, oh, it's in the Bible. It's in the Talmud.
Right.
It's in the Korah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is Quran. Sorry, the Quran. So, I mean, but that's human nature. I don't think it really has anything to do with religion. Or, and for the atheists, it's Darwin said. It's Darwin and Dawkins, They'll go over with them. So I just don't, it's just really infuriating me. And also, there are people that are like saying that I've heard people say that they're so mad and they'll bring up the Holocaust and 6 million Jews. Everybody fucking knows the 6 million Jews. Okay, we know. Okay, they're not the only people on earth who have suffered. There have been other Holocausts. So why is it okay to commit another Holocaust? If you're so traumatized and what happened to your people is so horrible, why is it okay to do it to somebody else? You're a Nazi all over again.
Right.
I'm sorry. How is that? Please tell me. Because you say it's okay, because you're hiding behind some doctrine that makes you superior or thinks makes you superior. So it's okay to kill babies and children and kick people out of your homes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I know all Jewish people don't think that way. Okay? So but the people that are making comments like that, you know who you fucking are.
Right.
You're a murderer and you're Nazi. You are.
Yep.
If you're condoning this, so you can go and cry in the corner if you want. But I'm not going to feel sorry for you. Who's going to feel sorry for you if you're doing the same thing? Why do you want somebody's sympathy if you're doing the exact same thing that you're saying that somebody's done to you? Fuck off.
Yeah, it's true. And that's a really, really good point. And it's funny how, we have talked about atheists before and being self-righteous and acting like, then science becomes a new religion and so forth. But it's, you can see, like you're saying, where they would want to kind of run kicking and screaming away from the church and go from one extreme to another. The problem is that a lot of times they don't. They end up falling into beliefs of the religions of science and thinking that all that is correct and that science is better than, I guess, instinct or God or your soul or your heart, which is a religion in and of itself. So I mean, that must be really, really frustrating. I don't have any family members that talk to me on Facebook, so I've never had. I think I'm friends with a couple. Like, I don't even remember anymore. But yeah, I don't have anybody that does that, and so I haven't really experienced that kind of thing, And I've reconnected with some old friends, and all my friends from middle school are all awake, which was kind of cool. And so I don't know how that happened, but it just sort of did. And so I haven't had that kind of experience that what you're describing. But that's really frustrating to sit there and use the Bible as an excuse. And in some ways, I mean, if you're talking about blacks in the history in the United States, then, I mean, wasn't in religion also used in ways to justify slavery?
Exactly. Dehumanize.
Right. So then, do you believe it? It's like, do you just choose where you want to insert your religious belief? It's like, so I'm going to insert it here because the prophecy says that, because I just really don't want to give a shit about the people that are getting slaughtered and exterminated in this country. So I'm just going to use the prophecy here. But, when it comes to you and your family, and what if that were your children and your people that are dying and being killed? I mean, then do you suddenly, then you use the Bible to say that it's wrong? Because it can go either way, right?
Yeah.
Because they can use it on one side and say, well, this is the prophecy, and this has already been predetermined, but then they could also use, like you were saying, the teachings of Jesus, but then are in contradiction to that.
Yeah.
So when you can just use it however you choose.
Oh, totally.
And then,
that's with anything.
And then
that's with the Bible, that's with Dawkins, that's with, the Quran, the Quran, with the Talmud, with anything. I'm sure I'm missing some other religious doctrines, but with anything,
Yeah.
So you're not really safe if you, claim one religion or not religion over another. It depends on the person and how they're choosing to, what am I trying to say? What they're doing with what they've learned and how they're using it for or either against people.
Yeah.
But I would say too, I know people that are religious and they are, they're very nice people, and they do use the, I think they try their best to stay true to the word. And they do use it to empower people. Like, I think about Fritz Springmeier, and if anybody's familiar with his work, he wrote Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And, he's a very devout Christian. Even before he was in prison, he was framed for, I think, rape. He didn't do it. And he was in jail for a number of years because he was writing this book, And he got involved, I think, long story short, we did an interview on him. So you guys can check it out. We've done actually a couple, right? Fritz Springmeier.
We just interviewed him
once. You just did once? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe we aired it twice. I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So you can check him out, and then not only check out our interviews, but check out he has a lot of stuff on YouTube, and you can buy his book. It's really interesting, and he got involved in this because he ran into these girls that were like trying to flee from this cult, and then he found out that they had ties to the Illuminati, and I think at that time he didn't even know what that was, but he was saying, as a Christian, I was taught to help people, and I think maybe they were hot, who knows, but at the same time, like, if he could have been like, fuck this shit. Right. And like, this is crazy, but he stuck to his word, and he paid the price for it, but he's still, he is very, I'm sure I know everything about him, but for the most part, I hold him in very high regard and a moral person, and I don't see him, I don't know how he feels about the situation in Gaza, but, there are people that can use religion to do really good things, and it's a source of community for other people. So I don't hate religion. I'm talking about how people use religion to justify other people's evil doings or their own evil doings.
Yeah, I think that there's some kind of just universal understanding of the Word of God, and so that isn't attached. It isn't attached to religion. I think we all understand that we're not supposed to come onto this earth to hurt others, and we're not to come on here to steal their shit, and we're not, and we're not to be here to, murder them or rape them or that those are just kind of, that we're supposed to just have respect for one another. And we don't necessarily have to agree on everything, but we can just, back off and then just not impose ourselves upon them unless they're violating those things, in which case it is our duty to stand up for those who they're violating them against. So in other words, if a man's raping a woman, anybody who witnesses that has a duty to intervene. Yeah. Because you have a moral obligation. Put down your fucking camera. And, because that's what people do in modern society. They start filming it, So put down your camera. Don't worry about YouTube, and then just help. And just get, if there's more than one person, then maybe someone could put it on camera because then it might help the case later once you go to trial on it or something. But if you're the only one there, that's your obligation. And so what we're doing by pointing out that there's genocide in Gaza and against the Palestinian people, that the Israeli forces are exterminating them. That's what's going on. It's not, and they're doing it. There's a historical basis for how they got there that is against international law. There is a lot of greedy. They have a lot of greedy interest with regards to taking control of the Palestinians' natural gas and their pipelines, and so that's not. It has nothing to do with any fucking prophecy. Okay, it just you can't say that the prophecy has anything to do with going in to a person's home and then taking their and stealing and just destroying everything and killing a bunch of people. It's just, you just can't say that has any bearing or that has anything to do with that, I was just reading, I just found this group called Breaking the Silence, which is Israeli soldiers who talk about the occupied territories, and they tell the truth about what is going on and how they're taught to kill children, and they're taught to do all these things, and they and he describes this scenario. One of the videos that's on there, you can go to it. It's called BreakingTheSilence.org, and if you look at the subcategory called Under Children, then the guy describes this scenario of where they killed this little boy who was 12 years old just because they didn't want to deal with it later. Their superior told them, don't worry about it. Even though he's not really a threat to us, let's just kill him because we're just going to stick him in a jail anyway. And then there was another article that I found on that site that was recent. This was just written within the last couple of weeks, where this guy describes going into, he had been told to go into a Palestinian home and invade it. And then what he found was 3 generations of families. So there were, 3 generations, children, mother, parents, and grandparents. And they just went in and their job was just to obliterate these people's home and to kill them. And he didn't really understand why, He was kind of like, well, I don't really know why we're doing this, but that's what we were told to do. And so I just don't find that to be in any part of the Bible. I don't see that there was any prophecy that said that was there. Even if you try to use religion to justify it, I just don't see how that's possible. Yeah. I don't care. Where in the passage does it say you go into someone's home and you destroy 3 generations of families and you burn out their house? So,
I also kind of feel that it's like a lot of people maybe aren't satisfied with their life and they want revelations to come so they can just get it over with. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm just getting a message from Liam. He's actually available to do a call. So I think we're going to take a short break. And then when we get back, we're going to bring in our friend Liam Sheff, who wrote the official stories. He's on our page. You can find him at liamsheff.com. He's been on our show several times. You guys probably know who he is. Mm. But anyway, so he's writing a book right now about religion. So we asked him just impromptu if he wanted to come in and do it. And he said yes, he's available. So why don't everybody stay tuned? We're taking a short break, and when we get back, our good friend Liam Schaff.
I was on holiday with Sir Lawrence Olivier. We had decided that 9/11 was an intelligence operation. We'd all known about JFK. He had so many mistresses. The CIA shot him. Castro could never have done it. It was clear. We had become realists, conspiracy realists. How would we let everyone know was the question. We decided to buy T-shirts that told the contents of our hearts and minds to the world. We went to shop.truthertees.com. Even though the internet hadn't been invented at the time, we went to shop.truthertees.com. There we purchased Conspiracy Realist T-shirts, one of a kind, sold only at shop.truthertees.com. 100% cotton in men's and women's fitted sizes. I won't tell you which one I'm wearing.
Hi, welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truther Talk and hanging with us. So as I said right before we cut, we have our friend Liam Schaff with us to talk about, what are you guys talking about? Actually, Virstyne, you tell Liam what you were telling us during the intro. What happened?
I'm pregnant.
That's me.
Liam, and you are the father.
Dun, dun.
Sorry, we need a little comic relief. I think that first segment was really intense. I was really upset. So I was just basically talking about how, I'd kind of been out of the loop with TV, and then I found out, I was probably like a week or so late, but I found out that Obama's standing by Israel, and which I'm not surprised, but he came out and said it, and then I wrote a post that said, "Fuck you, Obama, you need to get back your Nobel Peace Prize because you haven't done shit." And quite a few of my friends and family members jumped on and were mad because I called Obama the F word. And then I had somebody else in my family said, I was like, "Are you aware of what's going on in Gaza?" And they were like, "Oh, well, it's in the prophecy." And I was like, "That's bullshit." That I was just talking about the irony of African Americans who are loyal to a religion that has brainwashed them. And, in Africa, when Africans came over to America or not like they came over, they were kidnapped or sold and against their will and came to America, they weren't Christians. They couldn't even speak English. And now today, people like to hide behind the Bible when other people do evil or they do evil and they justify it like it's no problem. And the whole thing too that Obama can do no wrong, but if Bush was doing the same thing, then, they would be upset. And I remember when Katrina happened, they were cursing Bush out left and right. But, now that Obama, he did that to, Gaddafi and the people of Libya, and now he's doing this. And it's okay because, A, he's Obama, and B, it's in the prophecy. So, he's in the right. And I'm just so sick of this fucking bullshit. And I'm saying that I'm sick of Jewish people, too, that talk about the Holocaust, but they're doing the exact same thing. In a nutshell. So, there we go. Hit it.
There we go.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on
Stand by your mensch. Give him 2 arms to lean on. Thank you, President Obama. Hello, my name is Shlomi Chemachemes from the constitutional places of the Israeli United States. And I want to thank you, President Obama, for standing by your mensch. Yes, we're Israel. We've definitely done some things that were racist in the past, but we're not Shlomiels all the time. Now, the Gaza rocket situation is unfortunate, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What you gonna do? But what are you gonna do? I mean, I don't know. What are you gonna do from a religious standpoint, though? How does that sound to you? Is that she's saying this, doing your research? We know you're writing a book about it, Liam. And so, is there a prophecy that describes that this is going to happen?
Yes, there's the prophecy of John that says that all kinds of crazy schmengels are going to happen in the sky. The elephant goat with the 18 fingers is going to come down, talk to Britney Spears, make an album, get married, get divorced, get remarried, stay together, get re-divorced, then the goat will ascend back to heaven. Mm-hmm. All the people on earth will boin. What do you really want to? You really want to talk about biblical prophecy? There's the prophecy. There's Revelation, not Revelations. It's Revelation. It was written apparently by somebody who was taking ayahuasca, you know, like,
Right.
you know, or taking the rye that was rotten with ergo, so it was sort of an LSD kind of thing. And everything happens. But the ancient Jews were a people in love with prophecy, and none of their prophecies came true. But when the Christians got a hold of the Torah, they rewrote parts of the story that they sort of hijacked from the Gnostics, who hijacked the story from the Dionysus cult, the Mithras cult, and that story was of the dying and rising God-man. So they then had to go back into the various parts of the Old Testament and say, well, this guy predicts that this person will have a son who will rise into importance, and that must have been Jesus. But no, it was actually an Old Testament story, and it was fulfilled then. She had a son, and he was important. What about other prophecies? Well, they had a lot of time, you see. Now nerds have a thing called the canon, you know, the CANON, the body of work. And for some reason, nerds think that when an X-Men movie is made, it actually has to follow some of the comics that, I don't know, I can't remember his name, Todd McFarlane made in the 80s or 90s. I know he made Spider-Man, but whoever was making X-Men back then, see, I don't know. But there was a canon of X-Men, and Jean Grey turned into the Phoenix, and there was the Phoenix saga, and she was turned into a redhead, and I think she was a brunette, and she could have all the power and destroy a universe, and she had big titties, and she could fly, and she was exciting, and you couldn't relate to her, so she was like sort of like a Kardashian or a Hilton, you know, she was just distant in a way, but powerful. Now, when the X-Men movies got made, the nerds got very upset because there were too many changes from what happened in, 5-6 years of comics, or however many months it was, to one, Brett Ratner directed movie that made hundreds of millions of dollars around the world because whatever, it was a decent action movie. So there's a canon that's written over time by people. Then there's a movie version that's made later. So they didn't like X-Men 3. And I know Virstyne, you're asking about the Bible, but I'm answering, believe me. They didn't. Okay. The nerds didn't like X-Men 3. Even though it was a perfectly serviceable, enjoyable action movie, Rebecca Romijn was naked in it, just about. I just love looking at her. She's a fine actress, and she's gorgeous, and she's tough and funny. Actress. She really is. Underrated.
Yeah, she
underappreciated because she was just too good looking.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was like, I thought she did a good acting job too. Yeah.
She was good in a lot of other movies. Anyway, so they make X-Men 3 and they don't like it, so they make X-Men 4, which is the X-Men with the kids in it. It's just awful. It's just pointless crap. It's X-Men as teenagers or whatever they are. And then they made another one. They just made one called X-Men Days of Future Past. Now, in this one, they decided that they didn't like what happened in 3, and they had to go fix everything. So somebody time travels, but just in his head, but it happens anyway, and he changes everything, gets rid of everything. Now everybody likes it. So what did they have? They had 10 years, or however long it was between X-Men 3 and 7-8 years, and X-Men 5. They had a Wolverine movie in between. They had 2 Wolverine movies in between, and they're probably going to make another. They had time to go back and say, well, the comics said this. X-Men 1, which everybody liked, said this. X-Men 2, which most people liked, because it was pretty good, said this. And X-Men 3, we have to get rid of. So how did they do that? They wrote it into the book. They wrote it into the script that no longer happened. That's a reverse of a prophecy. But you understand how you can take a book that is a story that exists over time and has many writers. The Old Testament has many, many writers, and most of them are fakes. That's what the word deut means. It means second, Deuteronomy, and then you have second Isaiah, Deuteronomic, however you would say it, Isaiah, and you have the third Isaiah. Those aren't 3 guys that, hey, I'm Isaiah. I'm Isaiah too. Well, I'm also Isaiah. They're not 3 guys named Isaiah. It's just a guy writing in the style pretending to be somebody else. And that's well known by biblical scholars. That's the whole book of Deuteronomy is supposed to be written by Moses. Guess who it's written by? Nobody that anybody ever knew. Now, the books of Moses are roundly agreed by biblical scholars not to have been written by the lawgiver Moses. The other problem with Moses is this guy never exists in this historical record anywhere. Never. Doesn't show up anywhere. There's no Moses in Israel. There's no Moses in any Egyptian lore. Not the guy who got the king of the pharaohs, whatever, Ramses killed, drowned when the Red Sea split. Not the guy who took 600,000 male Jewish slaves plus all of the women and children. Call that 1,800, 2,000, 2 million. 600,000, like times 2, times 3 for women and children. 1,800, something like that. 600, 1.8 million. So closer to 2 million people leaving that doesn't exist anywhere in any Egyptian writing. So who's right? What are we talking about when we're talking about prophecy? There's no kingdom of David except a tiny, tiny little, chiefdom. Nothing that you'd call a king. Nothing even Shaka Zulu would call a kingdom. I mean, it just doesn't relate to these giant cities and massive structure. But I'm going to ask you, Spider-Man lives where?
In Metropolis?
No. Superman.
No. Superman lives in Metropolis. He lives in
New York.
Manhattan, New York.
He lives in New York City. Where does Superman really live?
New York.
New York City. And if you watch
Right.
the Superman movie, the Twin Towers are in there, and the Empire State Building is in there. We know that these characters live there. We know that they do. But do they? Does Spider-Man live in New York?
Well, I mean, he doesn't really exist.
But wait a second. There are 5 Spider-Man movies made in the last 12 years. They've made billions of dollars around the world. There are about 40 or so years, maybe 50 years of Spider-Man comics, action books, coloring books, lunch boxes, Burger King things. There are so many pieces of Spider-Man history. Now, we know the story of Spider-Man. And in the beginning, the story of Spider-Man, he was bitten by a radioactive spider when he went to a lab or whatever like that he worked in. But then later, that origin story was changed, and he was not bitten by a radioactive spider. What happened in that story? He was bitten by a genetically modified spider because the writers of the story adapted it to their era. Now, the writers of these prophecies, they'd have a prophecy in the Old Testament. It would come true, or it wouldn't. The writers of the next book would... Virstyne, they would tell them that it didn't come true because the Jews were bad. Very often the Jews would say, this prophecy would have come true, but we were bad. They're looking for that psychological reason why their God, Yahweh, or YHWH, which they couldn't say, which we say as Yahweh, but it was a name that meant this is, the name that you cannot say. Essentially, the name of God is not the name of God, but everybody forgets that. After they buried Asherah, who was the consort, the female goddess, they were a polytheistic desert tribe like everybody else. But the worse that they fared, the more monotheistic they got. They're like, well, we can't do this, and we got to be different from them, and they're polytheistic. We're not going to be polytheistic. So you can tell your family that it's well understood that most of the Bible is deuto, it's written by frauds, and pseudo-epigraphical. Pseudepigraphical. That means, do you know what that means? Pseudo-epigraphical. Epigraphy is to write, letter writing. Pseudo. At least half of the letters of Paul, who we call St. Paul, who was not a witness to the life of Jesus, and nobody who wrote anything in the Bible was a witness to the life of Jesus, half of his letters are well understood and admitted to be pseudepigraphical. That's a nice Christian word that means totally fucking fraudulent. Written by imposters, but they don't care. So you can tell your family that it's well understood by academics who don't want to trouble your brain that this book is mythology, that was a story that was later turned into myth, and the myth was eventually turned into religion, and at the point that it was turned into religion, it was seized by the Romans, who remade the story from Mark to Matthew, not Matthew to Mark, but from Mark, which was the first, to Matthew, which was the second, but because Mark was so bad and so unspecial and so ungodlike that they changed it. They added a different ending. It's well known that they added a different ending to Mark because he didn't have the magic resurrection ending. Then Matthew comes along and tries to fix it and tries to tie up all that prophecy stuff, in his very good Greek. And then Luke comes along and he's even better Greek and tries to make it something for the non-Jews. And then John comes along and adds a lot of prophecy, beats up on the Jews, and adds the concept of gnosis, which comes from the Gnostics, which brings in a totally different spiritual, because Christianity has now become its own religion by the time that John, who wasn't John, it's just a name that's given to it, wasn't the fisherman, he wasn't an apostle, Everybody knows that. Every academic knows that. And if your family, if you're very, very, very literalist, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with spirituality, but if your literalist family thinks there's anything wrong with that, I want to direct them to the work of a guy called Bart Ehrman, who was a fundamentalist preacher who still believes Jesus was a person, unlike, other critics, but who cannot take for literal any particular passage in the Bible because he understands history, the writing process of the time, and that it was okay for everybody to fake letters, to write in the style of mimetic writing. I mean, they've got word after word for fake, mimetic, like mimeograph. They just have word after word for fake. So I hope that answered your family's question. Now back with the Shlomi show.
They're not going to fucking... They're just going to be like, 1 Corinthians 3:4 says that. I'm fucking done. That's what I'm going to get. Oh, you're not a believer. I'll pray for you.
Well, I gave you my best. I gave you my best shot.
That's what I got. So, but thank you. Maybe some other people would take that to heart that are listening.
Mimetic, pseudepigraphical. I mean, duto from I believe the Greek. It sounds like the word duo for twice or second. They have other words that I can't quite recall right now, but and then they have the entire thing called the Apocrypha. I believe it's called the Apocrypha, which were all the biblical stories that they just didn't let in. They're like, yeah, you're too crazy. Then there's the Septuagint, which is, I think, the 70 books that really comprise most of the Torah that the Christians in like 325 or something said, yeah, you can't. So the Eastern Orthodox Christians believe that Daniel, who went to the lion's den, also killed a dragon.
So did they rewrite it to suit their own self-interest? I mean, why was it, because you're saying it's like it's been done over and over and over again, the same story, but then they rewrite it based on what's going on in the time, but then how do they like splinter off into all these different secular groups?
Well, when America goes into its ultimate decline in the next 20 years or so, if you're not near a place that has a staunch libertarian / slightly liberal town hall tradition, if you're anywhere in the Bible Belt, what you'll see is exactly this: all the splinter groups rising up, and their own psychologies, their own terrain, their own childhoods, their own environments, their own availability or lack of food will dictate the strength of the anger of their God or the forgiveness of their God. If you're in an area where milk and honey is flowing, God will be much gentler. You may even have more Jesuses on the way. If you're in the desolate wastelands of some part of New Mexico or Missouri or something like that, God is going to be very angry with you, and your myths will reflect that. I believe that that's exactly how it works. At a certain point, the ruling powers in Rome, like Constantine, who was a strange, not quite cross-dressing, brutal, murderous emperor like the rest, didn't really have a vision that said, under this sign we shall, INRI, under this sign we shall have Invictus, we shall have victory. But instead he chose, he favored every religion. And the triumphal, I don't know if it was a column or an arch, but that he built after winning that battle in which he supposedly was converted, contained Sol Invictus and, Apollo, I believe, and all the other gods. So he didn't really have a mass conversion, but it suited him to gather the Christians under his empire by, favoring Christians. And certainly he didn't make it legal. Somebody else, and I think it wasn't Diocletian. I can't remember who it was. Domitian, maybe. I know that doesn't mean anything to you. But another emperor made it. Another emperor who didn't like Christians made it legal to be Christian. And the Christians were mostly persecuted, even though they have this legend of being constantly persecuted, and they were, but not. I think the number that people come up with is like 2,000 people killed in 10 years, which sounds like a lot until you realize that. The Romans killed supposedly a million Jews in Jerusalem in a 4-year siege. So 2,000 people in 10 years doesn't sound like a lot. And mostly it wasn't 10 years. It was a short period where Christians were disrupting the military and getting in the way, and so they were told not to, and if they didn't, of course, they were killed. So the whole Christian story isn't quite there. Christianity is a strange, bastardizing hybrid that stole Greek philosophy from Aristotle and Plato through the Gnostics and the Essenes. Yehoshua Natsri would have really, which we'd say Jesus the Nazarene, was an actual character, and he was an Essene. He was practicing a mystery cult, a mystery religion, in which God couldn't be fathomed. God wasn't a word you could say. You had to encounter spirituality through mystery ceremonies that you would go through. That was taken on, and the whole Gnostic tradition was stolen, and that gnosis was turned into really logos and was part of the Gnostic tradition. So, very devout Christians will tell you that logos is the word, and first there was the word. Before anything there was logos. But that's a Gnostic tradition. That's not a Jewish tradition. It's not a Christian tradition. It's a Gnostic tradition. That didn't enter Christianity till the 100s, till the Gospel of John, which wasn't written by John. So what do you want to tell your family? You can tell them that they're ignorant. You can very fairly walk up to them and say, you're ignorant. You have no idea what the Bible is. You have no idea how it was written. And you've been essentially mentally enslaved. Congratulations. Here's a gift.
And they're going to say, verse John chapter 4 says. That's what they're going to say. I know. This is just for myself. I'm glad that I know this for myself because I feel, more empowered knowing that.
Free
people,
yourself from mental slavery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not an attack on the spiritual. The spiritual tradition is everybody's to pursue, but it's my take on marriage. I followed the wonderful Israeli woman whose name I can't recall right now. I'll look it up. Whose TED Talk? It's the only TED Talk I've ever seen that was worth anything, except Christopher Ryan's was pretty good. But her talk is called "Cancel Marriage," and I totally agree with her. Just get rid of this crazy institution, work out your relationships, make your own pledge, figure out what works for you, and get the state out of it and the church out of it. F you guys, you want money, you want us to feel shamed. Screw you. I feel the same way about all religion. F you. Get out of my head. Get out of my heart. Get out of my soul. I talk to the gods that I talk to. I have my relationship with the spirit of the universe, not you don't tell me how to have it, fuckers.
Yeah.
And so what about, so you said it's been rewritten several times, and been written, you mentioned how they stole it from the Greeks, and then there's a lot of, I think, passages in the Bible that sound very similar to ancient Egyptian myth as well. And then, what's your take on, I guess, the mysticism of the elitists or the New World Order or whatever they are, and how they plan things on would be the first New Year day for the old Egyptian calendar of 9/11, and how does that tie in your opinion, to a religious practice?
I'm so, and I feel like we need to call Sean Stone because I'm so uneducated about. I'm so uneducated about New World Order, myth.
Right. Probably be a good person too. He's into that.
I know I'll get there, but I don't know. I mean, Yeah, I mean, their god, Baal, I think they worship Baal, I believe. Mm-hmm. Or what's their god that they worship?
I don't know.
The owl? I don't know.
Yeah, the owl. Well, the owl's an ancient.
That was the Bohemian Grove. I don't know what their...
Moloch or... I don't know. I don't want to say... Moloch.
Yeah, Moloch is... I believe, is a Babylonian, Assyrian, probably thunder god or, Moloch, if we looked it up, is probably similar to Hades, or could even be, Yahweh. The interesting thing about the Jews is there were no Jews. There were many tribes that related to this, but I believe the tribe of northern Jews for a long time had a god called Elohim. I believe that's the case. And I believe the ones in the south had a god that they eventually called Yahweh, or however they said it. Why? HWH. So these groups combined, and one buried its God and its tradition in the other. So the Bible contains many names for the Hebrew God because they're actually different gods. They're worshiping different gods, and they just they round it down to the nearest whole number.
But don't both Judaism and Christianity still take from ancient Egypt? And then I guess that's where I was I never understood the connection. I'd heard people talk about it, and I just sort of washed over me. And then until I recognized the old calendar, the date is on 9/11, and it's just hard to miss that there's all these events that occur on that day. And so is that a coincidence? I don't know. There seems to be some sort of connection mystically or in astrology. I don't understand it at all myself. Like, I haven't looked into that really, but it just is curious.
The myths, I find that interesting, and I'm going to have to follow that up, because the idea that 9/11 would be an interesting date in the history of Egypt means that, there are people who plan things and pay attention, and, they get a thrill, like any master criminal, right, on leaving a trail.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, and I'm really speculating right now, and I hate to do that, but if that's the case, it is sort of a well-known trope of what are those called? Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury. That and this is where I'm basing this on. That criminals like to. If you look at a lot of television stuff about criminals, they'll always tell you that they like to leave signatures, and I've come to believe that's true. Because whenever I go into Whole Foods and I go into the bulk section, I eat as much as I can, and I look right into the camera, and I go, I dare you. I dare you. Because what are they going to do? Sir, spit out the cashews.
Oh, do you park in the hybrid parking spaces? I love doing that, and I don't have a hybrid car. That's like my favorite thing, and I
How do you know
my
car's not a hybrid? How do you know?
How do you know? Well, because it doesn't say hybrid on it.
Yeah, well, how do you know? What are you, hybridist?
I have this fantasy that the green dude would see me park my car in the hybrid space, and then he's gonna check it out and confront me and be like, "Is your car hybrid?"
Yes,
and I'll be like, "No." I'll be like, "No."
Yes, it is a hybrid. It has a very small battery in it that runs the radio and starts the car. It's a hybrid. I'm out. I want to answer the question about overlaps from the Egyptian to the so-called Christian. Well, of course. Now, this has been well covered by very, very, very serious scholars like Acharya S., who's got 30 books on the subject. Acharya, Acharya, and let's see, some others. Tim Freck, I think, or Frek. His name looks like Freaky, but I don't know if that's how you say it, so I'm going to say Freck. And his book, and then his books, The Jesus Mysteries, and then the other fellow's name I can't remember, called The Pagan Christ. Then the world's 16 crucified saviors, which came out somewhere in the late 1800s, mapped all of this Isis, Osiris, Dionysus, Bacchus, and Krishna. I mean, the parallels between Krishna, Buddha, and Jesus are strident and striking. Isis was the mother of Horus. Horus is one of the sun gods. Horus, what's the opposite of the sun god? The god of the declining sun, which would be what? Set, from which we get what? Seitan, right?
Yeah.
That thing that vegans eat, seitan. That's what they're eating. All right, I'm kidding.
Station.
That's a Japanese word. I don't know what it means. But Satan, really, Set and Satan probably come from the same word. So we have repeating mythologies of a god who is born to a magical woman and a god, and who is separated from parents and born magically and has temptations and is a grain god and a dying and rising god. And then the mother figure of Isis had a cult in Rome and Egypt, and it was a very large cult that women would go to, the cult of Isis, the temple of Isis, the temple of, the Holy Mother, which would sometimes, probably like all of them, function as brothels on certain holidays. And in that, the image of Isis in statuary and in painting and relief were of a mother with a full bosom, guess what, feeding or holding her baby. Now, there was no Virgin Mary cults. Mary is barely mentioned in the entire New Testament. She gets a few mentions. In the first one, somebody yells out her name. Isn't that the carpenter's mother or whatever? That's it. And then in the second, they give her a couple lines. And I think by the fourth one, she's finally by the cross and sort of weeping. But it took that long. It took all of those stories for them to get their shit together, their story together. Right. Because, the Spider-Man that they made in the 70s, where they had a live-action Spider-Man, you can't watch that. That just hurts your feelings. Like, that's not Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah. Right.
That's not Stop it. Just get out of the suit. Go back to Walt Disney World. That's terrible. And then the Spider-Man finally that they made, the cartoons were good, but finally the Spider-Man that they made in 2000 or 2001 or 2, whatever it was like, wow, that's really Spider-Man. I mean, that's really, he's like flying through the city, and we like the actor, he's sort of nerdy, but we can relate to him.
Oh, the Tobey Maguire one?
Yeah, Tobey Maguire, yeah. Yeah, Mr. Smuggling a sausage, that's the Hollywood rumor. Big man. Oh yeah. Really sweeping across the city with baloney in his Spider-Man.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. Good for Mary Jane, I guess, if she can handle it. She looks like she could.
Right.
Looks painful to me, but not my thing. But so there's Tobey Maguire, and finally they make a good Spider-Man movie. And we're like, geez, I didn't think superhero movies could really be kind of slightly emotionally engaging, but there it was. So it took them that long. It took them 50 or so, 40-something years to get their story to where the audience said, that's exactly what we've seen in our heads. Mm-hmm. That's close to what we've seen in our heads. Now, they made another one, and it was good. The second one was good. They made a third one. It was hugely embarrassing, just hideously stupid. Then they made another one, and they restarted the whole thing, and they rechristened the Christ story of Spider-Man. Now, he doesn't, his parents are there, and he sees them, and he doesn't really know what happens, and his dad is like some kind of weird scientist, and he goes into hiding, and you don't know what's happening, and he's like from birth genetically bred to be Spider-Man, so he's more of a Christ Spider, he's more like Spider-Christ, you know what I'm saying, Spider-Jesus, in this next incarnation of Spider-Man movies, because Tobey Maguire was never supposed to be Spider-Man, he got bitten by a goddamn spider, But in the new one, the guy's dad worked on the genetic experiments, and the son was probably always going to become something. And you see, they keep making the story more magical. And that's what happened through all the writings of the Bible stories. In the Gospel of Mark, which was the first one written, not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it was Mark that was written first from a document that historians call Q for some reason. Which nobody has seen, which is just a document they assume existed, or a verbal, an oral tradition. By the way, here's for oral tradition, Just saying.
Here's for oral tradition, but
Thank you.
Yes, you're. But no, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just going back to the Egypt thing, I guess, because now it's just been in my mind lately, and I'm just a curious person, and I don't know what it has to do with it, but because they have that new, CIA, most likely CIA manufactured group, ISIS, and you mentioned the Egyptian goddess Isis.
Well, that is wild.
But why do they call her ISIS? I mean, why is it ISIS? I was ISIS in 5th grade. I think I went as ISIS for Halloween, but
wow!
It was
look at that. Look at the reach of look at that. That's 3,000-year-old mythology. Mm-hmm. Look at that.
Well, it was the 70s, or early 80s, 70s. They brought her back as I want to say, was it a TV show? I don't know where she came from, but I just remember that she was some kind of superhero figure, and I was that. Was she on Wonder Woman? Well, I don't remember how I knew who she was, but I'm going to look it up right now, see if I can find the images of it, but it was, and I don't honestly remember that well, but my mom always tells me how I really wanted it.
Oh my God!
I really wanted that costume so badly. I was obsessed with it. But I don't know. I honestly don't remember.
Look at my memory. Listen to this. Isis is a DC Comics superhero, as well as a separate Egyptian goddess, also living in the DC universe. The recent superhero is modeled in The Secret of Isis live-action American Saturday morning television program in the second half of the Shazam out. Wow, we grew up with it.
Yeah, we did, and now now they're turning it into a terrorist faction. I mean, that's what they're calling it. They're calling it ISIS, and I don't really and they're not Egyptian, or at least they're not supposed to be. I don't think so. It's just bizarre. This new Al Qaeda sect or whatever the hell they are. Whatever they're claiming they are. But yeah, it's really bizarre.
No inside knowledge on my part, but I am fascinated by the repeat of these ancient names and concepts. They have currency with us, and we take them through time. Just like the dying and rising God, or the magic child on a mythic journey, who was half God. And I can't stop talking about Spider-Man right now because I really just sort of talked it out, but the new Spider-Man is a God-man because his father imbued him with the genetic... I didn't watch the second of the remakes, the remakes, but I saw the first, and what's the word? Apparently his father, who was played by a well-known actor, I can't recall, Campbell Scott, was a scientist, and whatever that means to you, who worked at the genetics lab that Peter Parker eventually tries to infiltrate, where he gets bitten by the magic spider that his father was part of. So he is favored by just as in Mark, Jesus was not a God, he was a good man. He was a good man in the first written gospel. By the second, he was the Son of God and said that to people. But by John, he had come from a virgin birth. There's no virgin birth in the first gospel. They got to keep adding it and adding it and adding it and polishing it because why? Because they're standing around in agoras, in city squares, in town centers, in village huts, and around fires, and in open fields, and they're telling stories. And what happens when you tell the story? It gets better and better and better. And then you finally write it down, and they say, don't forget the part that this happened. Oh, yeah, that was really good. Well, what if he does this? What if he does this? This is it's like a 200-year screenwriting exercise, the whole Jesus thing.
I just got that. It took me a minute. But yeah.
But is it back to Virstyne's family, I don't understand their literalism, I guess, is what I'm kind of curious about. It's how they take it so literally. Does it serve some kind of purpose, or does it allow them sort of an absence of use of their own thoughts or their own critical thinking, because then they can just chalk everything up to the prophecy, or this has already been bestowed, this is destiny, for example, and so then you don't have any kind of responsibility because it's already been predetermined for you.
Why is your family this way?
I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's number 2, and I think that's with a lot of people that, and I think that, I posted some footage of people being shot and killed over there. They probably didn't even look at it, And I don't know if they really saw what was happening, if they can walk away and honestly feel good about saying, well, that's just the that's the prophecy, So it's okay just to let it play out. I was told that I'm not a believer, and that what else was I? It was really. It was, and then they were like, well, why aren't you crying for the black people here and the black people in... I was like, so is there a rule that says I can only be upset about one part of the world at the same time? And it's funny, I'm like, I didn't see them posting any of that stuff or talking about any of that stuff themselves. They're just mad because I said, fuck you to Obama. That's it. Really, I really think that's it. They're just mad because...
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Would they, if the same were happening under the white devil Bush, would it be as upsetting?
More upsetting. Yeah, probably.
I mean,
But
that's what I
I
meant.
said
Like,
in the first segment, that I think that when Hurricane Katrina happened, they were a lot of people in my family that were upset, as they should have been, because I was upset about that too. It's not like I wasn't. There's no way, there was no need for those people to be out there for days, and just the way they were treated. And later I grew to have a friend that was actually in Hurricane Katrina. It was a survivor of that. So it's terrible. But it's this spell. It's this spell, and it's just like people want to act like that we've just because we have a black president that we've risen above racism. But anybody can be just racist. And as when things were happening in Katrina, I know white people that would say that the black people brought it on themselves. And because they like Bush and they stood by Bush. So it's like the same cycle that's going on over and over again. And, people don't realize that we're not our race, we're not our sex, we're not, we are in this body, we have bodies, but that's not who we are at the core. And so many people are bought into these lies of race and religion and what it really means, and, it's okay, how it's okay to treat people or not care about people because of that.
right.
So, it's just,
Well, because, what we're talking about, how this is all you're mad at Obama because he's supporting Israel and they're basically exterminating the Palestinians, and so, but then they're using their religion to justify it as well. So it's like it's just basically, these books or this mythology is just so people can get away with, stealing and pillaging and taking their natural gas and their resources and doing whatever it is they want to do, create their own state,
yeah.
And then say, well, we do it because this is what this book told us to do, and it says it, and so therefore that's what it is. Right?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
So then but then on the same token, a Christian is using it so that they don't have to care either. But they're not Jewish.
What is that quote? It's that famous quote. Oh, I can't think of the name of it, but it's basically like when they came for the Christians, or when they came for the Jews and the Catholics, I said nothing. I had said nothing. I said nothing, and then when they got to me, there was nobody left to speak up or help me because I didn't say anything in the first place when I saw it happening to other people. Paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember.
You know what quote I'm talking about?
I do. Do you know what she's talking about, Liam?
Yeah, it was from I believe it was from a Where's Waldo monthly.
I bet you can find it. I'll look it up.
It's from Martin Niemöller, was a prominent Protestant pastor who emerged as an outspoken public foe of Adolf Hitler and spent the last 7 years of Nazi rule in concentration camps. He is best remembered for this quotation. First they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awful.
That is awful.
Yeah.
But that's, yeah.
You should have gotten the fuck out of there, man. That's all. Like, get out.
Right.
No, it wasn't. He was in the concentration camps, right? So
I know, but like leave town. No, I listen. I've
that was probably.
No, as being like 5/8 to 2/3, whatever it is, 5/8 Jewish is the actual number that I can trace, which puts me a little over half. Jews on both sides. We're surrounded, but there were people whose religion we didn't know on one side. So. Because of that, and because of not growing up Jewish, I've had a strange relationship with it. But knowing that my father was, but knowing he didn't really practice, and not knowing that my mother's family was, half Jewish, and just sort of pretended that they weren't, I often think, and because, I was sort of in a prison camp in high school, the Sidhu thing, which I made the documentary about, where, we couldn't leave, I've often thought if I saw things going badly enough, right, you know, the people who think, well, you know, if you're in the ghetto and they in Poland, and they say, well, you can't leave here you know, you can't do this, you can only walk around in this time of day, or you can get the fuck out of our country. I'm going to think, I'm out. I'm going to swallow a couple pieces of gold, and I'm going to go.
Right.
I'm out. I've seen it happen before.
Yeah.
You know, there were many Russian Jews who left and lived in the woods, and of course I got to know this like everybody through a movie called Resistance with Liev Schreiber and Daniel Craig, who's just such a good actor, and people only know him as James Bond, where he's still very good. But both of these guys made a very...
I know. I'm sorry. I know the movie you're talking about. I love that movie.
Yeah.
But they ran to the forest and they fought off the Nazis. It was an awesome movie.
And then they fought with each other, you know, and they factionalized, you know, because that's exactly what happens. Because one of them wanted to avoid trouble and one of them wanted to punish. It was very well done, well made, and it puts a lie to the myth that the Jews just sort of went willingly, which is good. I think it was good for me psychologically. I think it's good for don't hang around, don't trust them when they're coming at you with, you know, sharpened knives, the night of long knives. Don't come at you when they're breaking the glass of your store. You know, don't hang around. Just get out.
Right.
Like, don't think that the state is incorruptible. Don't do that. Now, back to Israel, the state that is totally corruptible. Mm-hmm. You got to look up this woman. Oh, boy, if you could get her on your show, that would be such a coup. What did I say about marriage? Delete marriage, cancel marriage. Now, I went out of my way to learn more. Void marriage, cancel marriage. Cancel marriage. Merav Micheli is a beautiful, dark-haired, dark-eyed. I think she's a young new in the parliament, or recently in the parliament, or whatever it would be called in Israel. And I watched one of her parliamentary talks, and it's a small parliament. She's talking, and she's essentially saying, "Look, you know, we've let ourselves get away with feeling sorry for ourselves for a long time, but we're in the middle of many nations of Arabs, and we're essentially waging a nonstop war on one group of them. And what do we expect? You know, what do we? How do we let ourselves do this? That means that there must. That's no solace for everything that's been going on. But there are people, and she's not young. She's got to be 44 or 45, but she's young for being a politician, and there are people coming up in Israel saying, we were raised with the so-called imprimatur of the age of Aquarius on our foreheads, and we were told that life is about love and freedom, and then we grow up in this, and you're doing this. We know this isn't right. I don't want to hear your historical excuses anymore. We're not interested. The Bible stories aren't working out for everybody. We're just a country. There are people in Israel who are coming up saying, we're just a country. That's all. We're just a country. That's it. Now, wouldn't that be a different news headline? Israel admits, we're just a country. We have no magic powers.
Well, that does happen, but it's just that's not a mainstream storyline. But there's whole groups of people doing that. There's whole groups of military that are admitting that they're told to kill children and women and go into their homes and kill 3 generations of families and burn them down. And they're told this by their superiors. This is real. And it's happening to these people. It's 76% of the Palestinians kill their civilians. Less than 7% of the Israelis kill their civilians. So what does it tell you? They're targeting civilians. They're exterminating. They just want to get rid of them. And so it's I don't know. I don't know how they cannot. They don't, because they have a certain level of privilege. There's this really great lecture. We played it in one of our shows. We had Sarah on because she's really knowledgeable. Our good friend Sarah Sotomayor is really knowledgeable about all this stuff. She's much more learned and had the background on it than we did, so we brought her in to talk about it. And she had introduced this lecture from this Israeli born a man named Miko Peled. He was born into a great deal of privilege. He was this general's son. He wrote a book called The General's Son. And he just says, they have different rules for Israelis than they do Palestinians. So they're not motivated to speak out because there's a certain level of privilege. If he goes to a protest and he gets arrested, he goes home at the end of the night. A Palestinian goes to military prison where they're deprived of water and food and they're beaten and tortured. So it's just kind of, it's just a very disparaging. It's not an apples to apples fight. It's very, so you can say what you will, but at some point it's just wrong. You can't just stomp and just destroy civilians and children and just think that you have any kind of justification for it at all. And so getting back to the idea of using religion as a crutch to justify it, it's sort of like, the way I look at it is that there's a God and there's certain rules that God has, and those are just like, don't kill people. They're very simple. They're not like, there isn't, you take all that stuff aside and it's just like simply, don't murder, don't be a douchebag,
don't rape, don't murder, and don't steal from individuals, but steal from large corporations. Definitely do that.
But if you don't, and then if you see somebody else, if you see that going on, then it's your duty to kind of intervene, and that it's wrong.
Well, the murdering and the raping thing, yeah, but yeah, but if I saw somebody like pilfering from Walmart or Sears or I don't know if Sears exists anymore, or Whole Foods, I would walk the other way. I would definitely, like, if they were stuffing their pants with bacon, I would just walk the other. I might even clap, like, you'd go, you'd do that.
Because Whole Foods is robbing us. They're overpricing.
Yeah, or Walmart.
That's
or anybody. They take the fat of the land. It's in the Bible.
Right.
Exactly. Don't muzzle the ox while he, whatever. That's in the Bible. Don't muzzle the ox while he does something.
But there's a certain understanding. Like, we understand the little guy. We empathize with the underdog because that's what we all are.
Yeah.
In the big scheme of things, we're not the 1% or like 0.001% or whatever. We're little guys, right? So we empathize with that, and we all understand that that's our job to kind of defend the defenseless. And so that's what I think that God would want.
Yeah.
If you want to put God into a person, they just want you to take care of.
Well, here's what I think. If you want to be reductionist about it and say God is, as far as we know. And I have a very spiritual view of the universe that really leans hard into Taoism, and I'll tell you that Shiva, the great what we call the Great Spirit in Western Native American spiritual philosophy, was the first, I think, deity concept that I actually had contact with that made me feel good. Great Spirit, and then Shiva was the first god that I think I truly could worship and understand, and then there were other Hindu gods that really made wonderful sense to me as avatars or representatives of mystical human and real worldly experience blended into these gorgeous figures and this great mythosphere. So Shiva really spoke to me. But if you take And then then there's the Vishnu too. The Trimurti, the Hindu system is so beautiful. That Brahma is the god that dreams the universe, but Brahma comes into existence really, even though he's the primary, comes out of existence sitting on a lotus that emerges from the belly button of Vishnu, who sleeps on the bed of cosmic serpents lying on the eternal void or the eternal stars, and Brahma dreams, opens his eyes, and there's the dream of the universe, and inside there we are in the web, each of us a shining jewel in the web, reflecting every other jewel in the web, and thinking that we're dreaming the dream and interpreting the dream in our own way. So this wonderful system of imagining the universe, much more as it seems to us, as a metaphor of constant holography. You see what I'm saying? The splitting of light through prisms. That's how I feel about things. That's what the universe looks like, the constant splitting and resplitting and the remaking and remaking and remaking of life and experience and notion and idea and feeling through another infinite number of slivers of crystal. And then the Hindu system, we're all different slivers of crystal, all in the universe is shining through all of us in its own way. And we're emerging from the universe, and the universe is shining through us. And exist, and then we fall back into the liquid form, that's transcended. So there are these beautiful, beautiful myths that affected me very much. Then there's the strange Western myth. Oh yeah, and that's the first contact I had with spirituality that made sense to me. But then there's the strange Western myth that asks us to feel that we're the creation made of clay that had air blown up its nostrils, and set along on a mission to meet a snake, fall out of favor, suffer, wander, and it's just such a boring, intellectual, I think, conceptually limiting story, and I kind of hate where it takes us. Now you're talking about why people believe this. I can tell you that the myth reflects the culture. The fertility of the culture will birth the myth. Egypt was a very fertile culture, even though they struggled with flood and death. Their god was the Nile god. Their god was the sun that brought crops, and their god was the river. As in the ancient Greek gods were capricious because the ancient Greek world was, rocky and barren and difficult, and you had to work hard to get the olive groves to grow, and then you had wonderful food and libation, and then that was good, but that could be taken away. So you had gods that liked to be tricked. They're mirthful. They were sardonic and played with human beings as objects. They even played with each other. That notion of deity made more sense to me as a kid than the notion of one guy who was a burning bush, who never really had a face. You never were allowed to see the face of God. You sort of imagine the feet and the gown, but not the face.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I never understood praying to Yahweh. He was like a child's version of Dad, like an infant's version of a father who never picked him up or loved him. And that world of the ancient Hebrew tribes was a tough world. It was hard scrabble, and they were surrounded by tribes had small skirmishes with. They never developed into a large state. They never developed into a large civilization, and they kept going along and along and along and along until then they lived where they finally got back to their land. They built a great temple, and then the Romans came along, and they said, "You're just like everybody else, and you're going to pay us taxes, and we don't care who you worship." And they said, "No, you don't understand. We're special. You see, we're special, and we have our own special relationship with our God, and we're not going to do what you say. We're going to rise up against you." And they kept rising up against, and the Romans kept killing them, and rising up against, and the Romans kept killing them until the Romans killed 1 million of them, took them all into slavery, and drove them under. At that point, 70 years after the guy was supposedly magically born, at that point when the temple was destroyed, at that point you get the beginning of the first writings about a guy called Jesus, who was a Jew, who rejected the messianic Jewish quality of trying to overthrow the Romans. This is such a political story. I don't know. I know I went off on a tangent. I know we were talking about
that's great. That's great. I think I'm glad that you came in and added some of what you did, because I was really livid the first segment. So I think it's a good way to mellow things out and get people to think.
Yeah, man. And if you love Jesus, if Jesus is that thing to you, I really like that. I understand why people say they love Jesus. I feel the presence of the gods in my heart, mind, and soul. I really do. And Jesus has I get it. Jesus is love to people. Jesus is forgiveness. Jesus is a second chance. I get that. The story doesn't have to be literally true for that the myth that you take from it to have value, because the myth came before the story. The myth came from Mithras and Osiris and Dionysus and Prometheus. Prometheus, not the Ridley Scott movie, but the god who loved people, who wanted people to have strength and hope and warmth, stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity that was struggling to raise itself out of oblivion. And the gods punished him and crucified him on rock. Or maybe it was a pole. It depends on who you read. Another interesting story: Jesus wasn't in the Bible. Wasn't killed. Wasn't crucified on a cross. He was crucified on a pole. That had to be changed. It's just the story is just constant. They keep remaking the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's interesting. It's very interesting.
No, I agree too. Like, I don't have a problem with people worshiping Jesus, I
Yeah.
just, or the Bible or any of that,
Yeah.
really. I mean, it's this level of literalism and the hypocrisy of using it to suit you
Yeah.
and justifying, things that are wrong, which I don't think if Jesus existed would
He would condone.
appreciate.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
Yeah,
I feel
don't
the same
find
way.
that.
I concur with what you just said, and it's just the hypocrisy of how people use it to benefit themselves or to benefit others for doing evil.
And what we've talked about in the past is how atheism can also lead to that same sort of religious zealot, in that the people will believe in science is the same as they'll take that literal and not really look into it, not really read the facts or the data, the truth about what's really going on, or the historical evidence of.
They'll just quote you from Dawkins or Darwin. That's their Bible.
Well, nobody.
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody quotes. People quote Dawkins because he's pithy and rhetorically clever, but nobody quotes Darwin, because if they actually read Darwin, they go, "Wow, wow, that's wow. This was written a long time ago. This guy really,
Yeah.
really didn't know what he was talking about."
Yeah, right. No, but that's used time and time again, the social Darwinism, because then that's the other justification of sort of the sacrifice of the people for their God in the name of science, and 90%. I've seen it circulate. I don't know if this is true or not, but I've seen it circulated around the internet. 90% of scientists are atheists. I'm like, no, they're not. They have a different, their religion is something else. They believe in, because they're certainly not. I mean, they might not believe in God or what, the typical, or the
White dude in the
idea of
clouds
what.
with the beard.
Exactly, they might not believe in that,
Yeah.
but they certainly have like a belief in some sort of myth.
Or something.
Not all of them. I'm sure there are some that are true to research. And all
No,
that,
everybody has a myth somewhere in there. We're incapable of not having myths about the world. It's impossible for people not to speculate. And as soon as you begin, listen, I told you what I told the audience what my myths are. The Tao Te Ching, but the Tao symbol of the yin and yang that symbolizes the division of the infinite unknowable into an infinity of paired opposites that manifest in the world. That's my central mythos. And then I enjoy the myths of the Hindu and some of the Native American. And I've heard there's some stuff in the Greek. I love the Greek pantheon. I mean, I relate to those guys. I mean, I talk to Hermes and Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who would have been Sophia in the Bible, because again, the Bible killed the goddess. The wisdom is referred to as a she because she was Sophia. She really was a goddess, and creation came through the wisdom of the goddess. It didn't happen because God made it. It happened through the wisdom of the goddess. But that was removed, and most biblical scholars will tell you, most serious scholars will tell you that the ancient Hebrews were polytheists. They'll argue about the order. Well, first they were monotheists, then they were polytheists, then they were monotheists. But really, that's not true. They were polytheists. Everybody's a polytheist. Everybody, whatever you worship, becomes an incarnation. Whatever has a face that you begin to personify. Like I have a little blue monkey and a little yellow lion. They're a little bit real to me. And if anything happened to them, I'd be sad. They're little stuffed animals.
Right.
But I'd be sad. Why would I be sad? They're, because they're imbued with a quality of personhood. They have meaning to me. Something about the universe, something about tenderness and kindness and friendship that these were given to me by people, and love are embodied in these little things that have little sewn-on faces.
Yeah. Well,
and my
that's
full-size Virstyne doll, my first.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Paid a lot of money for that.
Yeah, I didn't see any of it. Where'd it
I had to
go?
measure you while you were asleep. It was hard work.
Oh,
Oh god.
full-size Virstyne doll. Okay, well, really good chat here, you guys. I think we're going to go ahead and cut to a break, and then Dee and I will close out the show. But we want to thank you, Liam. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking about this with us.
Yes, Liam on his Jesus journeys.
That's right. So when's the book due, or when are you planning to have it?
I'd really like to have a book out by late November. I know it's August now, so I'd really like to have that. And I think what I had to do was forgive myself in advance for it not being as towering an achievement as Official Stories. But you have to understand that was 10 significantly different academic subjects that I had 10 years to work through, and I don't have that. I have to take on 2 or 3 things, but I can't take on 10. I think what makes Official Stories work. I mean, it's very, very good. Each chapter is very, very good. But then you turn and you're in another thing. And you're like, Jesus Christ, that's I know what I just said, but you're like, wow, that's another. I mean, we just went from HIV to Shakespeare, and now we're in Darwin, and it's just like, wow, that's a lot of stuff, but it hangs together really well, and that's a power that makes it a powerful book. But I just have to forgive myself. This is going to be a more discursive book. You're going to hear my thoughts more, and I just can't. I don't have 10 years to write the next book to accumulate all the information. So it's going to be out by November.
Okay, good.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading
Mostly it's penis drawings. That's mostly what
just penis drawings throughout the years.
Like as dogs, as animals, The
evolution of penis drawings.
Yes. Super penis, spider penis, wonder penis, woman penis.
Right.
All right, I got to go.
All right, well, thank you for being on, and we'll cut to a short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us, folks.
Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the ties between Israel and the American Jewish establishment are very strong, and they are strong in this country. As you know, they have power, which it's okay. They are talented people, and they have power, money, and media, and other things. And their attitude is Israel, my country, right or wrong, the identification. And they are not ready to hear criticism. And it's very easy to blame people who criticize certain acts of the Israeli government as anti-Semitics, and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people, and that justify everything we do to the Palestinians.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truth or Talk. We just got off with our friend Liam Sheff, or Liam Skeef. He was talking about religion. And we did this show sort of impromptu to get, Virstyne had some things going on with her relatives, just using religion as an excuse for genocide, and it's just sickening and gross. So we wanted to bring in Liam because he's writing a book about religion and sort of talk about that from a historical aspect. And so now we brought in our friend Sarah Sotomayor, and we wanted to bring her back on from sarahshealingjourney.wordpress.com to help us close out the show so we can get back to this subject that we had when we had her on last time, talking about all this stuff that's going on, this crazy stuff that's going on in the Middle East. So, hey, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi. How are you guys?
Good. I'm better now. Liam kind of calmed me down. I was pissed at the first first segment. Yeah. Just talking about how I had a relative that said that, well, first of all, I criticized Obama, and because, a lot of people, listen to his speeches and how he talked about hope and peace, and since he's been in office, he's brought nothing but the opposite of what he promised. And not, not only to the rest of the world, but to the people of the United States as well. And it's sad that the people of the United States don't really see how it's affecting them. It will affect them in the future, but, And I think that, black people, don't want to even, they'll listen to what he says, but they won't look into what he's doing. And Jesus, or the Bible, really, but I have a problem with people that are hypocrites, and I have, problem with people who use the Bible as an excuse to do something bad, or to give somebody an excuse to do something bad. To me, that is sickening. And yeah. And I mean, not just, Christians only do this, every religion does this as well. And,
right.
And people that are atheists do this too. They use science, so it's like, I don't, anyway, so I was really pissed and venting about that, and Liam came in. We talked a little bit about religion. He's a genius at that, and I know anyway, so yeah.
yeah, I can totally see the parallel with what's going on in the Middle East. Nobody is allowed to criticize Benjamin Netanyahu or the Israeli government, or you're automatically you're anti-Semitic, which is farther from the truth. So it's just like, if you criticize Obama, you're automatically a racist and you're anti-American.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Even though, there are people that don't like Obama because he's black, but people that just voted for him because he's black are just as racist. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's racism on both sides. So there might be some people who just don't like, Israelis, but in this case, I think the people that I'm seeing that are just either just nuts or they're racist are the ones who say things like, well, let's just let them all die, both sides. And because we had these guys on our web page or on our Facebook page that were just like, oh, let's just let both sides die and God will figure it out.
Yeah.
So they're trying to use that as an excuse too, the religion or God, saying that God will take care of it and all these people will, either go to heaven or go to hell, so he'll figure it out. It's like gross. I mean, I just don't get it. Like it's very disturbing to watch children being slaughtered, and then to have people in our country who are supposed to be thinking people say, oh, well, it's fine as long as it'll work out in the end with God, or it will, using religion, or just like you're saying, your family just using religion as if, well, it's the prophecy, it's in the Bible, it's the this and that. You're like, but I mean, do people really get it? Like, can they empathize at all that these are like real people, or that would you feel that way if it were your own children, if it was your niece and nephew, if it was your, would you really, like, I don't know.
They would.
Yeah,
they wouldn't. I doubt that they would.
People using the Bible to justify the slaughter of an entire race of people, when in all actuality the Bible is not a historical document. These people who are now in the Israeli government aren't people who descended from the Bible or from Jerusalem. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, and go ahead, Virstyne.
Yeah, no, you're right, Sarah. It's I mean, I feel like I just keep saying the same thing over because I'm like, it's sickening. I was in shock. I was really in shock that that person in my family would say something like that. And especially, black people have been, terrorized in this country, by the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. I had family members that were from the South that experienced Jim Crow, and they can still say that, looking at these people and be like, oh no, that's okay. But I think that there's just disconnect too, and I think that maybe some people might say that because they also feel like there's nothing they can do about it, so they don't want to acknowledge it. Because we physically at this point, the best that you've been trying to do, Sarah, April has been trying to do, we've been trying to just use social media to get people to look into this issue deeper, and I think that is helping to a certain extent, and it's helping to open people's eyes. But, we can't physically go over there, and if we did, I don't think it would do any use to protest, physically be right there, because there are people that are protesting. I think it's for it to stop, they're gonna have an intervention from another army, to get them to stop. And I think people are scared of the Israeli army because they're so powerful. I know if they go up against Israel, then the U.S. is going to step in.
Right.
So, I mean,
Go ahead. I was going to say, and the Israeli lobby, like the Israeli government lobbies for certain politicians in the U.S., and we fund them. We give them $11 million a day for. We help them out. We help them with weapons and everything. Yeah. So I don't think it's either going to come from the people pushing back really hard and all these protests going on in the U.S. and pushing back on the government and people calling their senators and congressmen and pushing back that way, or it may not happen at all. And I've heard Max Egan say that if we don't stop what's going on in Gaza, that Gaza will be the way of the world, because we're watching
I see
a
that. That's why
genocide
it's important
happen
to me.
on our televisions. And if they can do this to Gaza, then they can do this anywhere.
Yeah, I know.
In the open and everything.
Yeah. In Israel, I mean, and it makes me upset with myself because I knew that the genocides in Rwanda were going on, and in I think the Serbo-Croatian, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but in Europe, and I'm sure that there are other ones that I might not even be aware of. But that's why this one just strikes me as hard, because that was more, I guess, people with you know. I mean, it doesn't make it right, but what I'm saying is that Israel is a powerful country. Yeah. And they're getting away with it. And, you know, people have it in their mind that the first world countries are supposed to lead by example. And it's basically, like you said, if it can get away with doing this, then that's it. I mean, it's coming. This machine is coming after everybody else. You know, this is
found near you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like the Zionist regime has been the from what I've been researching as the history of Zionism and so forth, that this is that's the agenda, kind of, is world domination, is like, you know, no world order. It's basically because I don't know how they're very wealthy, they're very well connected, and then they seem to be. I mean, here in the U.S., you know, we're obviously one of the big superpowers that we go into countries and just take people down and do these, you know, kinetic actions or whatever they like to call them, which are basically just wars, slaughters. You go in and we steal their shit, and then we get out and leave them there, and or we just, you know, we enforce their democracy upon them, and then they vote in, you know, people that we don't like, so then we take those people out. Which is, I think that you sent me, Virstyne, the videos Ron Paul was talking about how, you know, Hamas was actually put in to position of power by Israel with the help of the U.S. Right. And then he was. And then we went in there and gave Palestinians, quote, democracy, and then they voted in Hamas. So it was like, well, you gave them the power, so, like, it's your fault. You know, why would you even, you know, how can you sit there and blame them now and get mad at them now for having made the choice? But that whole thing is a manipulation anyway, because as we've learned, you know, Hamas, and that's one of the most frustrating arguments. I think you sent that to article today, Sarah, with the they're talking about how, you know, there's two sides.
Yeah,
These guys are
the
both,
middle ground fallacy. Yeah.
The middle ground fallacy, because it really isn't double-sided. There really is just one side attacking the other. And then people just don't quite understand that. So how would you explain that? How would you guys explain that to people when they come to you and say, oh, but Hamas is doing it too?
First of all, you go, Sarah, you go.
Yeah, I'd like to quote the actual article, because he makes a great analogy with slavery. And the guy who wrote the article says, quote, "What about the enslavement of African Americans or Africans by the white man for 200 years of American history? If one side of the continuum is slavery is perfectly right and the other is fundamentally wrong, is the truth somewhere in the middle? Maybe middle ground, like slavery is wrong but other forms of oppression are okay, or slavery is wrong but forced indentured servitude is okay," end quote. So if we can all agree that slavery is wrong, then why can't we agree that mass murder and ethnic cleansing of any race of people is wrong, and that the Hamas rockets are glorified pipe rockets. They're not even, they don't have a military. They're made by people in defense of the slaughter that is happening to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, Hamas was created by Israel and the CIA, and even furthermore, why is Hamas continuing to send rockets over to Israel and Tel Aviv, and them just not even reaching Tel Aviv, the rockets?
Yeah.
It's giving Israel a reason to keep bombing the Palestinians.
Right.
It's giving
Well,
them that reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I would say, look at the news that you are, the mainstream media, and then look at alternative media and compare the two broadcasts, right? So what I've seen in mainstream media, they've been siding with Israel. And they barely, first of all, they barely talk about it. I mean, the last thing I heard was, when the 3 teenagers got killed, and they didn't have any proof. It was basically people talking about what happened. But when I go to the alternative news people, I see reporters that are actually there in the Gaza Strip, and they're filming, and taking pictures of families that are being bombed. And these are civilians. They don't have any uniforms. They don't have their own tanks or any advanced, sophisticated weapons. So you know that these people don't have an army, right? But the Israelis have an army, the Israeli side. And I think, they're people that buy it because, too, like me for a while, too, I just thought that, you hear sound bites, you hear memes that go through society. Nobody really researches anything. We know this, being in the truth movement, that, even with the vaccines, how people just, anything that we've been fed basically has been a lie. And, people will get on the news and they'll say something like, oh, a new study says that, and then people would say, oh, I know there's a study on this because I heard it on the news. But they won't actually go and look at the study. They won't read the study. They won't see who funded the study. They just know because they heard somebody say that there was a study. So it's like this sophisticated gossip campaign. Right, this propaganda campaign. It's basically just gossip, and until you look at both sides, you don't really, or compare both sides. Compare what you're being told, and then compare the alternative view, and see which one looks right to you. But there are people that just feel that they're so right, and they're caught up in that victim state of being discriminated because they are Jewish, or people that are sympathetic to Jewish people because they have been discriminated against themselves. Everybody gets discriminated against too. That's what people fail to realize. You get locked in that victim state. I've seen black people do it with slavery and Jim Crow, and they want to blame everything on the white man. And they're caught in their victim state, or they feel like, oh, they haven't progressed in life because they're black, and And I'm not saying that racism and, discrimination against Jewish people doesn't exist, but it becomes very crippling to a certain point where you can't let anything else in besides your victimhood, and that becomes very dangerous. So now you have people that are like, when you criticize Zionism, they don't hear that you're criticizing a political party and their ideals. They hear that you don't like Jewish people. Same thing when I'm talking about Obama. They don't hear that, oh, I'm mad at him because he's, creating more war than peace. They hear that, oh, you hate Obama because he's black,
Right.
So it's very interesting. You can take when people realize that we aren't our race, we aren't our sex, we aren't, our sexuality, we are all of these things that we identify with. I think that's when people are really going to wake up and be able to unify. But I think this is the trap that has gotten people so enslaved and so, so just blind to what's going on. And then they say, oh, they're just people, too, that don't want to stand up because they're afraid of confrontation. And they might even see what's going on, but they're so timid and cowardly that they don't want to stand up for what's right, and they think that it's not going to affect them, so they'd rather just turn a blind eye and, put their head under the covers or stick their head in the ground and pretend like, it's not going on. I think that's a huge thing that's keeping people so silent and so neglectful of what's happening.
And it's been done by design because as we've seen in some of the people who have gone into depth into researching this. And I sent you guys that lecture out by Alison Weir. I know Sarah had a chance to watch it. I don't know if you have, but she does the If Americans Knew website, and it's and runs the articles and things that are on that site. And it's basically she's explaining how the public is manipulated by the media, and how they will deliberately withhold information or embellish certain information. And it's really important, I think, to watch that and to get a grasp on how this, because when we're talking about how there really isn't any middle ground, she does a very good job of explaining there really isn't any middle ground. I mean, it's basically a one-sided fight. Israeli is attacking the Palestine. People who think that it's going the other way around is they're not. What she points out is that the timelines of when the events occur, when the killings occur, actually negate that. So they're in contradiction to them saying, well, we're just retaliating because Hamas attacked us. Well, that's not actually true. If you actually look at the time of the killings, they're actually Israeli are generally striking first. And and even if Hamas is sending missiles, which she says yes, he does, but these missiles are a joke. They're military. I mean, they don't even have a military. These missiles can't even knock down a phone booth, let alone kill an entire school or an entire the Israelis are doing. Just today they just sent a missile into, I think it was a school that people were using as a refuge. So refugees are being attacked. School.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, you're right. And it's people, we talked about this, I think, a little bit before. What would you do? It's just supposed to lay down and die?
Yeah.
And then, then people, I've heard people say, oh, well, they just want the land. Okay, well, then why are they trapping those people there? Why are they leaving them with or they don't have any place to escape to, really? They can't escape. They can't leave. If you wanted them off the land, you would have bombed them and let them run off the land and then taken the land over for themselves. But if you have them in a place where they can't leave and you're bombing them, and you're bombing them while they're sleeping, you're bombing them while they're in school, you're bombing them while they're in hospitals,
They're bombing ambulances.
They're bombing ambulances.
Right.
Then, you're killing. That's genocide. That's genocide.
Yeah.
You're killing people. And it's not like it's an accident.
Yeah, these people can't even run to the hills. It's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. They're pretty defenseless. I mean, it's literally beating up on children because a lot of children are dying, and
and the majority of the people in Palestine are 17. That's the average age.
Oh.
And they can't even go into Egypt. They can't even cross the borders because if you don't have a dual citizenship, you can't go into Egypt. You can't go into these safe areas. And they shoot anything that moves.
Wow.
It's and I think there are just some people that just don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that, I can understand why, too, that they're, I'm not excusing them, but I can understand, too, whether it's just people that don't want to believe that their country has any, is doing something that evil,
Right.
So they won't just believe it, and they'll just take anything that you say against their country personally as if it's a personal attack or if you're being anti-Jewish, because I just think that if most people, if they really knew, if they really understand, they wouldn't stand for it. I just I don't think human beings are innately that heartless or that evil,
Right. Yeah.
Even though I have seen reporters have pictures of Israelis sitting on their, sitting outside, lawn chairs and watching the bombs go off, like eating popcorn. And
yeah, they're not even hiding in bunkers. So the fact that Israel is being attacked, getting comfortable, screaming and cheering as these people are being bombed to death. Children.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, I feel bad for them, too, because they've been brainwashed, to believe that, that's how, any of the genocide, what happened in Germany, with, the Nazis and what they did to the Jewish people and the Polish people and the gypsies and you know, some black people and handicapped people and gay people, everybody that they killed and tortured, you know, the people that did that, they had to believe that these people were subhuman. That's like the psychology and how it works. Slavery, you know, like even you can go back in documents in slavery where they you know, people have written letters and documents and diaries and even a law where they didn't regard black people as human beings, you know, and that's how they were able to treat them like that, because they saw them less than human. But it's a form of brainwashing or mind control, I would even go as far to say. It is, you know, and it's really creepy.
It is, and that's what you know, Alison Weir does is breaks that down, and she doesn't use the term mind control, but she does say manipulation. And if you look at the some of the videos by the Israeli soldiers from this group called Breaking the Silence, have you guys seen that?
No, yeah. I haven't. I'm sorry. I'll have to get to that and see it.
Yeah, Breaking the Silence is a group of Israeli soldiers who have left their service at some point, and they, I think for the most part, maybe some of them are still in the military, and they talk about things that they're told to do, including killing children and, you know, basically who aren't even a threat to them. You know, one guy described a story that I found very disturbing about a 12-year-old boy who wasn't even a threat to them, but his officer told him to go ahead and kill him because we're just going to arrest him anyway, and then he'll just end up, you know, being a burden to us. So let's just kill him and get it out of the way. And so they're exactly what you're saying. Like in the Army, they're brainwashed into believing that they are subhuman, and they don't think of them in human terms. This one guy, it's a video called, it's about 7 minutes long, and it's called "We Filmed the Whole Thing" or something like that. And it's on YouTube called Breaking the Silence, and he's speaking Hebrew, so it's all subtitled, but he tells the story about how they went into this house and they took this boy, and that was their, those were their orders, was basically to kidnap whatever children were in there, whether it be, you know, any ages, you know, 9 to age 21. They didn't know how old the person was who lived there, but whoever it was, they were supposed to kidnap them. And so they did that right in front of his mother. And so his mother's screaming and going and like losing it. And they walked out, and he kind of, you know, was desensitized to it, he said. Because when he was in the moment, he was in the military, it was just sort of like taking orders. But then later when he went back, because they had filmed the whole thing, and they didn't usually film stuff like that, but they did. And so when he went back and looked at it, he was like crying, and he couldn't believe, he felt so much shame for having had participated in something like this, and how, you know, he was able to empathize. He was able to go, wow, if that were my, you know, my niece or my, you know, somebody that he had, I think, a little sister. He's like, if that was my little sister, I'd be freaking. My mother would be, you know, she would like pass out. And so it's just this, they just detach themselves, and they're trained to do that. And so that's what's really, really sad, is that they're creating a zombie army of Israelis and soldiers, and in the U.S. soldiers as well. And, you know, these are really powerful videos, but it's just amazing. It's amazing. People don't know. They have no clue.
Well, you know what? You know what's interesting too? I saw an interview. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but her name is like she's an Israeli activist, and her name is like Maya. I think it's Shelley. Something like that. We'll put it, it's going to be, actually the clip is going to be in the second part, so anybody who's listening, we'll put the link in the second part and of this show, and you can listen to her interview. But basically, she was talking about, like, you know, everybody has to join the military, I guess, in Israel after they, so the whole country is a military culture. They're all soldiers, technically speaking. So who knows what they do to them, how they, you know, brainwash them. You look at, and especially if you compare them to our military men who go overseas and now, you know, to do whatever they do, and then they come back and they kill themselves. You know,
exactly.
You know, they probably vaccinate them, I'm sure. You know, who knows? You know, who knows what's going on in their mind, if they're, you know, if they have been mind controlled to a certain extent. And yes, I'm going to say mind control. That might be an extreme word, but I would say mind control, because when you're killing families and shooting their children in front of them and bombing schools and watching little children burn up, and it doesn't affect you as a human being, something's fucking wrong with you.
Exactly. No, you're mind controlled, and you've been zombified or whatever, for lack of a better word.
You know,
You have, because, and that's what the guy pointed out, was that in the moment he didn't feel it, but then when he looked at it later, and he watched it with his family, and they were all crying. They just couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. And, because even they, in Israel, his family and these people don't get it. Like, they don't see it really either, and they're right there.
Yeah.
But, it's just, so...
Well, it's funny, too. You posted that quote on it was that Phil Donahue. Did you see that with Ayn Rand? I'm thinking it's Ayn Rand, right? And a lot of people look up to her. She's a writer, philosopher, and and she was on Donahue years ago talking about the Palestinians are subhuman and they're filthy and they're racist, and and thank God Donahue eloquently tells her off. But, there were people in the audience that were clapping when she was saying those things, and it just made me think, well, wow, she's a prominent person, a prominent Jewish person, and, she's saying these things, and people, maybe it's America, people are a little different, because when Donahue told him off, the rest of the audience was like, yeah, I can tell that there were more people in support of what he said, but, I'm sure there are a lot of people that support and believe what she said, and she sounded just like a Nazi when she was talking.
And very ignorant for someone who's supposed to be very smart.
Exactly.
It's like,
very intelligent.
I was disappointed in Ayn Rand in that moment. I thought that was horrible.
Yeah, never was really into her anyway. I don't really know a lot about her. Maybe but I'm just like, really? Somebody that's supposed to be so intelligent saying these really hateful, ignorant, stupid, disgusting things? It's crazy.
It is crazy. But on that note, we're out of time here. We might have gone a little over. We'll see. But so we have to go ahead and wrap up the show. But we want to thank you, Sarah, for coming in and joining us in this conversation. Before you head out, remind everybody where your blog is.
It's sarahshealingjourney.wordpress.com.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks,
and
Sarah.
So everybody, go check out sarahshealingjourney.wordpress.com and find out Sarah's healing journey and all of her stories. But she's obviously a well-faceted person. That's why we bring her on to talk about other things other than just what she talks about on her blog. But go check it out anyway. And thank you guys all for listening. Until next time, peace, truth, and love.
Peace, truth, love, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We like war. We like war. We're a warlike people. We like war because we're good at it. And you know why we're good at it? Because we get a lot of practice. This country's only 200 years old, and already we've had 10 major wars. We average a major war every 20 years in this country, so we're good at it. And it's a good thing we are. We're not very good at anything else anymore. Huh? Can't build a decent car, can't make a TV set or a VCR worth a fuck. Got no steel industry left, can't educate our young people, can't get health care to our old people, but we can bomb the shit out of your country, all right? Especially if your country is full of brown people. That's our new job in the world, bombing brown people. Iraq, Panama, Grenada, Libya, you got some brown people in your country, tell them to watch the fuck out, or we'll goddamn bomb them. But when's the last white people you can remember that we bombed? Can you remember the last white? Can you remember any white people we've ever bombed? The Germans, those are the only ones, and that's only because they were trying to cut in on our action. They wanted to dominate the world. Bullshit, that's our fucking job! And you probably noticed I don't feel about that war the way we were told we were supposed to feel about that war, the way we were ordered and instructed by the United States government to feel about that war. My mind doesn't work that way. I got this real moron thing I do. It's called thinking. And I'm not a very good American because I like to form my own opinions. I don't just roll over when I'm told to. Sad to say, most Americans just roll over on command. Not me. I have certain rules I live by. My first rule, I don't believe anything the government tells me. Nothing. Zero. Nope. And I I don't take very seriously the media or the press in this country, who in the case of the Persian Gulf War were nothing more than unpaid employees of the Department of Defense, and who most of the time function as kind of an unofficial public relations agency for the United States government. So I don't listen to them, I don't really believe in my country, and I gotta tell you folks, I don't get all choked up about yellow ribbons and American flags. I consider